So let's talk about that. And actually, there's a hedge fund manager, Ray Dalio, who we often speak about on this show, and he's a big one around, you know, hiring people with different complementary skill sets. And if you look at the best businesses, they've got people that round out each other's weaknesses. I mean, no one can be brilliant at everything. It's a fact of life. So, you know, can you talk through a bit of the different characteristics? If you were building a team, you know, what are some of the characteristics you'd look for?
Hey, you know, it's apt that you to ask me that question, because I'm right there right now. I'm actually right. I'm 3.5 months into this new role, and I'm actually spent the last 4 days reading 300 resumes. So okay. I'm right there right now doing exactly, and it's really interesting because the role I'm in is a brand new initiative within the AIS.
Yeah.
So I've got the chance to build something from scratch. So I'm building a team of 8 people initially.
Yep.
And so the question you've just asked me is on my mind every minute of the day right now. I've got some brilliant applications, some brilliant applications from people with some wonderful academic qualifications and a variety of other things to go with it. What am I looking for? One, I'm looking for diversity.
Yeah. I'm
looking for a diversity of thinking.
Yeah.
I'm looking for a diversity of skill sets. What's their background? You know, I've got them coming from team sports. I've got them coming from individual sports. I've got them coming from business. You know, what's their background? What's the diversity piece? I'm really interested in people wanting to. I'm looking for creative thinkers, problem solvers.
Yeah.
I'm looking for people. These are all words, right? But I'm looking for agility. I want people that can be agile and move really quickly.
Same as a lot of businesses these days.
Yeah, I need resilience, because you're going to get rejection. You know, we're going to be interacting with a lot of sports, and they're not going to be easy conversations to be had. So there are going to be doors closed in your face. I need people that can handle that, pivot and move forward. Look, I need people that can work autonomously. You know, I'm not a micromanager.
Yep.
I like to be challenged. I like different ideas and different thoughts and different solutions. So once given the leeway to move, I need people that can autonomously set about that, but are accountable as well. So lots of words in there. It's how do you find those people? Ultimately, when you're putting a team together, for me, it has to be about trust. That's going to come up a lot in a lot of your conversations, but fundamentally, the success of a team is going to be about that trust in all the relationships that are in there. So you want all those things in a trusting relationship.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting to hear you talk about being autonomous as well, because in the world we've been living in for the last 18 months, where we're not able to see each other, you know, human to human as much as we used to be able to, for sure. We're not at all at the moment if you're based in Melbourne. Hopefully not for much longer. Then, you know, and then you also speak about accountability. I think in the business world as well, it's actually managing people on deliverables, because the old time and attendance system, which started in the Industrial Revolution, is really outdated. It's having people that can be trusted, and, you know, you can trust each other to do what you need to do in a world where we don't really see each other as much.
Yep. I think that's one of the things that COVID's brought to the forefront. I mean, if we dial back, you know, what are we, 15 or 16 months into this process now? I think when it all went down in March, April last year, there was a massive scramble. There was, you know, businesses were reacting, and I'm talking all businesses, sport as well. You know, there was fear of how do we pay people? How do we keep people? How long do we keep people employed? We're standing people down. There was this whole fear piece about paying people for doing what. It's interesting. I think in the 15 months we've moved beyond that, and I think we've found that we can operate in a different way.
Yeah.
I think there have been some challenges for some organisations. There are some people that have struggled with the non-accountable environment.
Yeah.
I think others have thrived. I think the future workplace and the way we work will evolve a lot more around accountability and autonomy. I think they'll be the two. You know, it's a constant dialogue. Do your job. If you're delivering on your job, do it the way it needs to be done. So I think the paradigm of how we work has shifted in the last 15 months. There'll be some people that will thrive in that new paradigm, and there will be some people that will struggle. There are just some people who cannot work in this new situation.
Yeah, absolutely. And so you speak obviously building a team of 8 from scratch, and so I guess that's that greenfield environment where you can basically create it, and you don't have to inherit too many people, good, bad, or indifferent, whatever it might be. But most leaders, coaches, when they go into whether a business or a sporting environment, unless it's a startup, they're normally working with something that's already in place. And so can you talk through a bit around maybe what you would do if you were going into an environment where there's a team in place, what leaders often talk about, what the first couple of months looks like, and how you'd go about working through that piece?
That what you've just talked about is a typical AFL experience.
Yep.
So in most cases, you would be what I call helicoptered in. You're brought in and delivered. You're put inside a club and a team, and then you're actually asked to lead a team within a team. So that was a pretty typical AFL type experience. Not an easy one. Not an easy one, because you're obviously inheriting people that have got loyalties to predecessors and previous regimes. You've got people with some really strong ideas about how they want to go about the business. In my case, it was around training. How do you prepare players? How do you train? Things like load. Look, I wouldn't say, when I reflect on my AFL career, I don't think I did that as well at times as I had 3 instances of that. I think the very first instance that I did it, I thought I did it reasonably well. But interestingly, I had a really small team. We were a very small group. There were only 4 or 5 of us that I got helicoptered in with. And very quickly, we established a clarity of purpose, a method of operation, a trust.
People you've worked with before?
Sorry?
People you'd worked with before?
No, not at all. No, it was interesting. And in many ways, I was probably the most naive going into that role, because I was transferring from triathlon to football, right? And some would say, well, what was your gravitas coming to football beyond your triathlon days? So I had to get over that concept of being a non-football person. But that to me was the most successful team I operated with inside football. When I moved to a couple of other club situations, I probably didn't do that as well. But it was interesting. I inherited larger groups of people. I inherited, and this was really interesting, I inherited some really well-established relationships within the club. The people within my team had really long-serving relationships with other people within the club. And I probably didn't navigate that as well as I probably would now. But it is a challenging piece, because often in a lot of these cases, you get asked to lead a change process. We need you to change something. So that often puts you in conflict with people. And people are on edge because they know you've been brought in to lead a change process and freshen the place up. So it's a challenging piece. It's a challenging piece, but I think it starts from vision. I think it starts from a method of operation or an approach that's coherent and agreed upon. I think there's got to be a discipline around how you behave within that environment. There's also a piece around what's the accountability been before. If the accountability's been loose and suddenly you're bringing accountability in, that can bring problems. So there's lots of little minefields you've got to navigate through.
Really interesting. We've got a good question I'm just going to pose to you in a second, but just to play on a bit more, you spoke about being a non-football person going into football. So we see a lot in sport of, coaches, managers, leaders not being a top player themselves. And, some of the best examples of players in, lower leagues who have gone to be great coaches and get people like Pep at Man City, who was obviously an amazing player as well. So it's obviously there's no one size fits all, but you see it a lot in business that people are made managers or leaders because they're really good at doing the job, and therefore they may not be the best leader or coach. So can you just speak a bit around that, your views around that, and how any advice you can give to people, how you can be, I suppose, get credibility at being good at the role you're given?
Look, again, a really good question, and again, something that's really apt for the situation I'm in right now. We're doing a look at the whole concept of coaching. We're looking at success profiles around, what are the competencies of a high performance coach? Okay.
That's across the Olympic sport, right?
Yeah. And I mean, what's the range of competencies and skills that you need to be an absolute elite coach? And then that gives us a framework then to assess people's strengths and weaknesses and help them. Like, how do we then help them go on a journey to learn and evolve their weaknesses? But the interesting thing is, if you look at the pathway of coaching, there's a range. We've got what we call pathway or talent development coaches.
Yeah.
Then you go through, another layer of you can be an assistant coach, and then you can be a head coach. They're all very different roles.
Yeah.
They have a different set of, there are commonalities, but there are differences. If you're dealing with high talented juniors, for example, kids in the age of 15 to 18, guess what? You're dealing with mum and dad.
Yeah, right.
Mum and dad are bankrolling, right?
Yeah.
But if you're coaching at the top end, if you're an elite high performance coach with an Olympic team, mum and dad are only a peripheral. They're there as supporters because their journeys, so the competencies change. So I think, it's a really good question around, the range of, the range of competencies that people need.
Yeah.
When you come in as a non-person, I guess what I was able to do when I came into football is I came in with, and this sound, I don't want to sound the wrong way, but I came in with a known reputation for having delivered in other areas.
Yeah.
I'd also been a leader.
Yeah.
I'd led a unit within the Tassie Institute of Sport, and I'd led an Olympic sport. And so I'd been 15 years on the leadership journey, simultaneously to having some gravitas related to getting outcomes. That gave me a degree of credibility and a wriggle room to actually maneuver myself into the AFL environment.
Yeah.
The thing that's always challenging is when you go into a new environment, can the environment cope with what you're bringing in?
Yeah.
You hear a lot about, we want that diversity of thinking, we want that openness, we want a different viewpoint. But the question mark is, do they? Some organizations say they want it, but they don't actually want it. And that's the interesting piece.
Yeah, I agree with that. And actually, I mean, obviously not so much in the last few weeks, but it's amazing that this time last year, many CEOs we spoke with were saying, we're changing forever, we're never going to be in the office all the time. But a lot of businesses have reverted to type a few months ago and think, well, actually, let's get more people back in the office more often. But got a really interesting question, which you've touched on some of, but Jamie McIver wants to speak a bit about, or get your views around transferring coaching skill sets. So can you speak around, how important having that deep technical knowledge of a sport is, in the same way as it might be, moving from a telco to a finance institution, for example?
Yeah.
How
good question.
That transition?
Yeah, look, it's a really good question. This is interesting. And it's a quote that I've come across a lot in my new role. But you get hired for your technical and tactical knowledge.
Yeah.
You get fired for all the other stuff.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting that we're grappling with that piece. Typically in the coaching space, I'm not an expert in business, but we hire people based on their skill set, which is in that technical, tactical set. Okay. And we bring them in on the basis of that. We go around the side, delving into leadership, and we ask questions about culture and all that sort of stuff. Some people have already moved there. Some people are incredibly strong in all of those the softer pieces of they're the gems. They're the ones that give you greater chance of being success. But when you just go into the technical, tactical space from a football point or from a sport point of view, and the person lacks some of those softer things, there is a chance that if they're moving up the pathway to the top end, that's what's going to undo them. So there's this piece around continuing to learn, continuing to evolve, continuing to understand your strengths and your weakness, or complementing what your weaknesses are. For example, I've known some coaches that are brilliant technically and tactically. That's their place. But they really struggle with things like organization and management and some of those other pieces, and that's what has to be covered. They have to have support around them to actually make what they do hum.